This event could not have been possible without the generous help of the following platinum partners. First Lending Solutions, HousingWire, the Apartment Owners Association, the San Diego Creative Real Estate Investors Association, investClub for Women, MVT Productions, PropertyRadar, the San Jose Real Estate Investors Association, and White House Catering.
Good evening, everybody. Could I ask you to all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So, welcome to I Survived Real Estate 2015. Thank you. Please continue to enjoy the meal. We got to get going because we have two shows going on. There's one right here, right now, and there's one going on online. So we are going to continue with the party. So this is I Survived Real Estate 2015. It is our 8th year. 8 years ago when we first started, we had, thank you. 8 years ago, we had no idea we'd be looking at so many friendly, familiar faces around the room. I often get thank you notes from your significant others saying that it's the only time you ever get dressed up. So apparently this event has many benefits. In all seriousness, I just wanted to say thank you. Many of you over the years have been very supportive of our family. One of the only reasons I ever moved back to California, if you would have asked me 12 years ago if I would have ever moved back to California, I would have said, no way, Jose. I lived in New York City. My mom found out that we have New Yorkers in the house tonight. My mom found out she had bone cancer, and it was the only reason that I came back out, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made. Thank you. You all have been a great support. She passed in 2011, and you have all shared all of your stories and the struggles, and it's become a tradition, and it's a big part of this event. If your inner circle, family member, whoever it is, if they've have been or are currently struggling with cancer, will you please stand? It's always a very large number. Thank you so much. So, thank you. So it's one of the reasons we do this event is to raise awareness and a lot of money, and we've done that tonight. So, in the last 4 months, you around this room has helped us raise over $72,000 this year. Thank you. That brings the grand total in only 8 years. We are very close to hitting the $600,000 mark. So, for those of you who are online, tonight, it's up to you. We don't have that far to go. So if you're enjoying the program, you don't get off that easy. You might not be enjoying this fabulous meal and the awesome space. But you can always give. If you're at isurviverealestate.com and you're on the Watch Live, there is a link, and you can give. And please do. We're really hoping to cross that $600,000 mark tonight. In the audience tonight, we've got two members who went above and beyond. Is Buddy Broom and Tom Huwak here tonight? I don't think I saw Tom. Buddy, there you are. There's a little bit of a competition every year, and they were $10 apart. You guys raised the most out of everyone. And they were part of an awesome team, investClub for Women, who raised over $6,500 this year. So thank you. Our efforts tonight benefit two incredibly important nonprofits. Both help children with life-threatening illnesses. Odette Gutierrez is going to come up and talk a little bit about St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. And while she's coming up, we're going to show a short clip.
I really love playing football and lacrosse. I play that for my high school up in New York. I just really enjoy football. I've had from the beginning. It's up there with Bacon and my mom. Feels like top 3 right there. It's like a second chance for me, honestly, to play.
It was about 5 o'clock in the morning. Something woke me up, and I went into his room, and he was kind of staring off into space with this fixed stare. but his little finger was kind of scratching at the side of the bed. So I went in and spoke to him, and he couldn't speak back. And I believed I was seeing a seizure.
And then she brought me into the hospital to get checked out and whatever, and that's how they discovered the tumor.
They came and told us that there was a mass on his brain, and they were only giving him about a 30% chance of survival. I was scared to death, but I couldn't let on that I was scared because I had to be strong for Jake. My sister found a research article at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. At the bottom of the article, it said, "For more information, call this number." Within an hour of making the call, Dr. Merchant called us back.
Jake was newly diagnosed with ependymoma. Jake had the most aggressive form called anaplastic ependymoma. Ependymoma typically arises in very young children, and those are the children that are most vulnerable to the side effects of treatment. So we pioneered the use of radiation therapy in children. We brought children to Memphis for this specialized treatment, and then what we did that was unique was to follow them very carefully afterwards to show the rest of the world that this treatment could be administered safely.
And at the time, he said they were getting about an 80% chance of survival. And so every day we would come to the hospital and he would receive his radiation treatment daily.
His tumor presented with seizures, and so that's why he came to see me, because I do EEGs, which are brainwave tests. And that was the first time I saw this cute, cuddly little boy.
We will take revenge. Jake and his mother, they were quite amazing from the beginning. And whenever Dr. Merchant would come in the room, he was just so excited to see him. He was quite a Dr. Merchant's little man.
I would exchange a drawing with him or something I made, and the first thing I gave him was a birdhouse, and I guess he still has it. So that's just amazing to me. It just shows how much of a great guy he is.
It's a good-looking birdhouse, and it's well designed. I've kept it all these years because it just makes me feel special and reminds me of him and his accomplishments.
The left side's like the blind side of the quarterback.
I learned that in the blind side.
Yeah.
Over time, he just got better and better.
I'm proud that he has grown so well and done so well in school.
To see him turn out as well as he did was really a dream and actually a goal of our initial study. Jake, now a 14-year survivor, proves that treatment not only works, but that it is safe.
To be a survivor, it's a great feeling because I still get to live. They gave me a life. St. Jude gave me a life to live, and you can never repay them for that too.
He's not just survived, he's thrived because of the treatment that was established and given to him.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I had the pleasure of attending I Survive Real Estate last year, and I am thrilled to be here. On behalf of the doctors, the patients, I just want to say thank you so much to the Norris Group, to all of the generous sponsors who have made this event possible, and to all of you who support the life-saving work of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Thank you. While many of you may have heard about St. Jude, I hope to share with you tonight why St. Jude is leading the way the world understands, treats, and defeats childhood cancer and other deadly diseases. Located in Memphis, Tennessee, St. Jude treats some of the sickest children from Orange County across the U.S. and around the world. And while St. Jude can only treat a fraction of the 175,000 children who are diagnosed with cancer each year, St. Jude is also making a difference in the global fight against childhood cancer. One of the ways that St. Jude is doing this is by freely sharing the discoveries it makes so that every child saved at St. Jude means doctors and scientists worldwide can use that knowledge to save thousands more children. Some of the best researchers and doctors come to St. Jude to be part of the fight against pediatric cancer because thanks to donors like you, they have the freedom to focus and to do whatever it takes to save the life of every child who becomes a St. Jude patient. Remarkably, treatments invented at St. Jude have helped push the overall cancer survival rate from 20% to more than 80% since the hospital first opened more than 50 years ago. Additionally, what makes St. Jude such a unique place is that families never receive a bill from St. Jude for treatment, travel, housing, or food, because all a family should worry about is helping their child live. And as Jake's mom expressed in the video, St. Jude not only allows for some patients to simply survive, but to thrive in their lives. That is the hope we have for every child and the reason why your continued support is so important. Thank you so much.
Okay, next we're going to get Kel Lindstedt up here with Make-A-Wish, and we're going to watch a short little clip about Make-A-Wish.
Tonight we are going to open Amina's Cafe. And Amina is a 6-year-old, lovely, vibrant little girl who wants to be a chef. So tonight we are here at the Thermador Event and Design Center to do just that.
We were honored to partner with Make-A-Wish Orange County and Inland Empire to grant Amina's wish. Amina's a lovely, very special girl, and her dream is to become a chef. And what better place to become a chef than in our Thermador Pro kitchen?
First, I put avocado in a little bit, and then I sided it. And then what I did is I put the shrimp, and then I put a little bit of some vinaigrette, and then I put tomato on top.
Amina was diagnosed with leukemia ALL. She was diagnosed March 12 of 2012. And when she found out about the Make-A-Wish, she was so excited that her dream was going to come true of cooking for us. She always likes to cook for us.
I love to cook because I like cooking and because I used to cook with my daddy in the night and I really liked it. I'm just so happy that they did this.
Thank you, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm actually really excited about tonight because I've heard so many great things about what the Norris Group does at this event, and I'm hoping I won't be disappointed. I'm actually planning to stick it out and learn some things from you guys. It's kind of hard to follow a Wish video like that, and I have sort of the unenviable position of following two videos, which puts me a little off balance in a sense, because I don't think that there's much that I can add to the Wish experience that Amina here didn't just say with her smile and with her own words. But what I'd like to do is try to put it in context just a little bit for you guys. I think that a lot of people recognize fairly easily, especially after you watch a video like Amina's, that the Wish experience really has a huge impact on the Wish child. But what sometimes gets left out and sort of lost in the mix is the way that the Wish experience actually impacts so many other people that surround that child. Now, Amina's story actually started back in 2012 when she was first diagnosed with cancer. And as a child, I really can't imagine what that's like to live through. And it's a little bit ironic, Aaron, because before I came here tonight, when I was writing this speech, I actually had no idea that you were going to call everybody out on the cancer angle. I was actually going to mention that my mother's actually at City of Hope right now as I speak, being treated for lymphoma that she's been fighting for about 3 years. So I do know what cancer looks like in a sense. I've seen that firsthand, that struggle and how difficult that is. But I also have two little kids, and as a father, I really, like I said, I can't imagine what it would be like to have a child in Amina's position that has to go through that. And so I think that exactly is why Make-A-Wish exists. That's why the organization was founded, to help these children that are going through this kind of a thing that adults struggle with, my mother's struggling with, and that so many people in this room have seen firsthand. And that's why we founded the organization and why we do what we do. And the interesting part about it is the way that Amina's wish has touched so many other people. And I actually brought with me today, I have a little souvenir, if you will. You saw her signing her cookbook there at the end of the video, and I've actually got one of those. It's an original, authentic, autographed. It's actually, you know, her little purple handwriting on the back. And I keep this pinned on my wall in my office. I have a little cork board, and I pin it up there whenever I'm having sort of a rough day or I can't remember why I took this job, which doesn't happen very often. I look up at that, and it's one of the mementos that we have from some of our Wish kids. It really helps me remember sort of why we all get up and do this every morning, and it's something that you all have become a part of by joining this I Survived Real Estate program. All of your fees that you guys paid to be at this wonderful event go to St. Jude and to Make-A-Wish, and so you guys have really stepped up, and you're not just here to learn something about how to make some money from real estate this year, which I hope you do. Hopefully, Aaron, right? But you guys are really extending yourselves into the philanthropic space and really making a difference rather than just building your careers. And I think those things go really well hand in hand together. And so I really want to thank you all for coming out and for participating in this fantastic program and for supporting the charities that you guys do. I actually have one other souvenir, if you will. This one's for Aaron. I have here a plaque, and Aaron, I want to give this to you on behalf. Let's turn it around so folks can see it. I think everybody had a chance to see it as we were coming in. This Adopt-A-Wish plaque, Aaron, commemorates the work that you guys have done to adopt Anthony's wish. Anthony actually wished to meet the 49ers, and so we hope that you will. I know, it wasn't my choice either. Actually not a huge sports fan, so I probably shouldn't say that with a microphone in my hand. But Aaron, we really can't thank you enough for putting this event together, for bringing all these wonderful people here. And I know you guys are here to hear about real estate, and we'll get to that in just a second. But I really can't stress enough that by coming out tonight and by doing something like this, you're not only advancing your professional careers, but you're also making a huge difference in your communities. And those ripples from that wish are coming through this room right now, and all of us get to experience that over again. So thanks for coming, and thanks for your support.
As always, I'm going to leave this up front because this is just as much yours as it is ours, so please take pictures with it, and I got to finally put these up on the wall. I've got a few of them now. It's really cool. So, the cause, awesome causes. Thank you so much again. We really can't do it without all of you here. So, on with the show. If you could please silence your cell phones. If you're one of those people who like the hard candy that's wrapped in the really loud stuff, don't be that person. Do it now. Get it over with. You know who you are. If you missed something tonight, please don't worry about it. We are videotaping it and audio taping it. It will end up on the radio show and podcast later, as well as on YouTube. And you may not know today is Bosses Day, National Bosses Day. So you can silence your cell phones, but maybe you want to send that last email so you can get it in so you don't get in trouble. For those of you with a boss. And I have one of the best bosses in the world. Last month, I got to celebrate my 10 years with the Norris Group, and it's been 10 wonderful years. Thank you. So tonight, he's the one who allows us to put on this great event. He's been a real estate investor for over 30 years, part of thousands of transactions as builder, hard money lender, real estate investor. He hosts our award-winning radio show, which morphed into this 8 years ago. I get to call him Dad, Bruce Norris.
Thank you.
Happy Bosses Day.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you so much. Is there something that I have to turn on? Am I good? Okay. Thank you so much. It's always hard for me to watch those videos and not tear up and have my son do what he did. So thank you for coming. In 1980, I had a unique experience. I was in an audience of about this many people, attending a seminar I didn't want to be at because I already thought I knew everything. And there was a gentleman named Jim Rohn who, in 3 hours, changed my entire life. His dedication to sharing what he could do for other people changed my life and allowed me to see a different way that life could turn out, provide for different things for my family, be proud of what I did, and then also got the bug to share. And so last year we decided that we would create an award in honoring Jim Rohn. We called it the Rooney Award, and Jack Fullerton was the first recipient, and tonight we have a second recipient. Our recipient tonight had a rough start, and I'm very thankful that he shared this story with me. I've known him for a long time, and I didn't know he was an orphan. At 4 months, he was dropped off at an orphanage, and he lived there, he said, till he was 11. But at 8 years old, he had a very important week. His Aunt May came and picked him up for a trip, and she had a Packard, and his brother hogged the back seat, and it forced Ward Hanigan to sit in the front seat. And what happened during that week is that him and May connected somehow, and he just had the most delightful week. But there was one particular day where Aunt May looked at Ward and said, "Ward Hanigan, I'm not going to worry about you anymore. You're going to grow up to be a great and wealthy man." And Ward said that when he heard that, he never doubted it for a moment. It went to the bone marrow in him, and he faced a lot of tough things, but he always landed on what she had said, and he said, "Everything's going to be okay. Someday I'm going to be great." And I met Ward taking a class from him. He always teaches one-on-one, and that was my first experience with Ward. And I've known him now for several decades. I've never heard anything bad said about the man, ever. When my son Greg decided he was going to take training about buying trustee sales, I said, "Well, you got to take Ward's training." I said, "To be honest with you, I'd pay $5,000 to him just so you could pick the phone up to call him, because he's literally the hands-down expert in that field." And if you go to his website, I think there's some significant pieces to the puzzle that get beyond money and get beyond what he has. It's who he is. And there on the website, there's a purpose. And the purpose says to win the hearts, minds, and smiles of real estate entrepreneurs everywhere by truly satisfying their quest to learn how to become financially independent. And then he has 11 values, and I'm going to only mention 3 that he has there. Number 1, be uncompromisingly truthful. I've interviewed him a few times. I always ask him this question: if you have an investor and there's bad news, and he interrupts me, he says, "They hear it right away." Bad news travels faster than good news, and that's an honest person. Number 7, never touch dishonest dollars. It's interesting that when you buy at the courthouse steps, there's a nickname for that group, the 40 Thieves. He never was one of them. He always did everything above board. And number 11, give more than what any recipient would reasonably expect to receive. To be honest with you, that's a blueprint to become a great person, not just a wealthy person. And we have a group of people that are on video that Ward would like to say thank you for what you contributed to their life.
My buddy Ward, if there ever was the real deal, it's Ward. He'll fill in the details on how to get the deal across the finish line, and he practices what he preaches.
I just wanted to thank you for being my mentor, my teacher, my friend, and my consultant for these many years.
I remember you, Helen, and I having lunch together several years ago, and you being so helpful to me. I was new in investing, and I wanted to thank you for your pearly words of wisdom.
When I first moved out from Chicago, and it's $60,000 to invest, I asked a repairman how to meet somebody that does notes. He recommended you, and it was a wonderful opportunity as a friendship.
One of his greatest successes that anyone can look at is how many lives he's touched, not only in business, but as a friend, and a friend that cares about others and looks out for their best interests.
Ward's always been a loyal friend and a supporter, and he's inspired me when I was down. And he helped me become not only a better investor, but a better person.
Ward, you've been just a great friend and mentor for me over the decade since we've known each other. And I've gone through hundreds of transactions with your help and the lessons that I've learned from you.
You're a great friend and a great mentor and a great person.
A great guy. I appreciate all the years of his help very, very much. I learned an awful lot and was able to pass on all that knowledge to our subscribers as they called in with their questions.
His hands-on title and foreclosure training that Ward and his wife Norris and son Eric have provided hundreds and hundreds of investors with a solid foundation and kind of a rite of passage, really, for a lot of investors.
Thank you for all that you have done for our real estate community. All of the Innovest alumni gatherings over the years have personally assisted me with a grand network.
Thank you so much for all that you've done over the years.
I took Ward's training in 1988. I think it was the month of August. And since that day, my life has changed tremendously. Not only we've created wealth, we've actually created a family. Ward, you're responsible for that.
I've still been doing real estate. I've been doing it every single day. I love it. And it's provided for our family. It's provided a life that's, this house we bought as a foreclosure. And it's through the original teachings of Ward Hanigan.
I think he's been a great example for me and many others of really how to take care of your family and appreciate your family.
Since August of 1988 till this day, he takes my calls. That's a guy. That's a guy that you want on your team.
I'd do anything for this guy. This guy really reached out and helped us, and he is the epitome of what a mentor is.
We originally met in 1984 at a seminar taught by Charlie Dorsey. Since that time, we've become great friends, and I appreciate all the help that you've given to me and all my friends, and I wish you the best in the future.
Ward, you have been an amazing coach. Norris and you make a great team. I really admire how you guys love each other, and that shows in your training and how you relate with us. It's just so beautiful.
Ward, I just got to tell you, when it's all said and done, I am going to owe you such a great a debt of gratitude. You really have helped me a lot, and I really needed the help. So, I continue to marvel at your materials, and I really value the mentorship and the friendship.
Ward's the best.
Thanks, Ward.
Thank you, Uncle Ward.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thanks.
Thank you for all the advice you give at SDCIA.
Thank you, Ward. We love you.
It is my pleasure to present to you the second Rooney Award to one of the brightest and kindest and greatest mentors that we have in our industry, Ward Hanigan. In a moment, we're going to have a picture of a house, I hope. This picture, when it arrives, in any second, will represent what the industry circle has been like since the peak of the market in 2005 all the way till now. Aha. Isn't that lovely? In 2006, this is really important because what we're going to talk about tonight is what's next. In 2006, this home sold for $364,000. It's 1,400 square feet in Moreno Valley. In 2009, 3 years later, it sold for $64,000. And in 2015, it's currently pending for $264,000. The definition of market value is the most likely price that'll be arrived at when a buyer and seller, each equally motivated, equally knowledgeable, make an agreement, and then there's a little adder at the end of that, and it says the transaction absent of undue stimulus. So what's undue stimulus? Let's say we had this house pending at $265 and there was no other comps for $265. They were all $240. What an appraiser's job is to take a look at that $265 and say, why did $25,000 appear? And what if when you unearth the transaction, it was a seller carryback loan with 0% interest for 30 years? Would that explain the extra $25,000? That's undue transactional stimulus. In 2006, this home sold for $364,000. Did it have transactional undue influence? See, what you just said is important. It didn't have transactional influence. It had systemic influence, which is much more powerful. It got to $364,000 because of loan programs. And so it didn't have any need for transactional stimulus. There were 10 other comps just like it, and everybody else bought it for the same price. There's another kind of stimulus. It's called reverse stimulus. So in 2009, this same property sold for $64,000. Why did that happen? Because at the time, there were 50 houses for sale for every $1,000 price increment in Riverside and San Bernardino County. So we had reverse stimulus. And $64,000, $365,000 turned into $64,000 on the backs of something else that occurred. It's now pending at $265,000. So here's a question. Does our market have undue stimulus or reverse stimulus? And what's likely to be next? So do we have undue stimulus? What do you think? Is 3.75% undue stimulus? Interest? Yeah, it is. This particular type of home had the concentration and the attention of a group of people called hedge funds. Was that undue stimulus? Okay. Now, do we have any reverse stimulus? We have a lending world that's saying no to a lot of people. And so here we are at $265,000. It looks like it has potential to go to $100,000 more, but then we have to go back and say, are we going to enjoy that kind of stimulus once again, or will the game be different? And so that's what tonight is about, is to talk about what's going on in the marketplace, what's the likelihood of the direction of the next stimulus. And it should be an interesting evening. We have the right panel. I want to mention that all of the panelists have really dedicated themselves to their industry. They're all spending the night away from home tonight. Not getting paid for that. It's something they do because they are willing to give of their time for this event, but also because this is the kind of people that they've been for years. They've given freely to their industry, and it's a pleasure to have them on the panel. We have David Kittle, and I'm going to have Doug Duncan come up next. We're going to have these two gentlemen first, and we'll have next group, and then we'll have all of them together at the end. David Kittle began his mortgage banking career in 1978 with American Fletcher Mortgage Company as a top producing loan officer. He moved to the management side in 86. He opened his own company, Associates Mortgage Group, in 1994 and selling it in 2006. Kittle is Senior Vice President of Federal Solutions for First American Mortgage Solutions, specializing in risk mitigation and analysis. Analytics, based in Santa Ana, California. He manages the relationships with HUD, Ginnie Mae, the Federal Home Loan Banks, and GSEs. Kittle is past president of the Louisville and Kentucky Mortgage Bankers Association. He's past chairman of MBA's Political Action Committee, MORPAC, and former vice chairman of MBA's Residential Board of Governors. He served on MBA's board of directors from 2004 to 2010. And Doug Duncan. Doug is Fannie Mae's vice president and chief economist. He's responsible for managing Fannie Mae's strategy division and economics and mortgage market analysis groups. Prior to joining Fannie Mae, Duncan was senior vice president and chief economist at the Mortgage Bankers Association, recently named one of the country's top 4 most accurate economists in 2010 by the Wall Street Journal, and named one of Bloomberg Businessweek's 50 most powerful people in real estate. Duncan is a frequent speaker on the national and state economic, housing, and mortgage market conditions. We'd like to welcome both of you up to our panel up here. Probably just there. I think that'd be fine. It's a little bright, but if that's what it needs to be, okay. What's interesting about preparing for these questions is I read and read and read, and then I put maybe 12 or 15 pages of questions together, and I hone them down, and I think I'm all done. And then I get to the room, and I start thinking, and then I have a limo ride, and I start thinking, and I have more handwritten questions than I probably have other questions, but that's the nature of it. And then I'm going to listen to their answers and probably come up with even better questions, I hope. So that's just the nature of it. David, you were with us in 2008, which was a humdinger of a year to have the position that you had. You said that in the following 16 months, how often were you in front of congressional meetings?
14 testimonies in 18 months.
14 testimonies, and into the teeth of quite a headwind because no one was in the mood to hear much of anything other, maybe just to chew out the industry through you. Is that pretty accurate?
It was a lot of red meat thrown out there.
Okay. Have we passed the vindictive state, and now have we landed in a place that's more constructive? I guess that's the best way to put it.
Oh, it's a lot better environment than it was 7, 8 years ago, and it gets better every year as you move past. But if you look at what happened because of that time frame, I don't know how long of an answer you want here, but what came out of that time period is what we're dealing with now, and that's the CFPB, right. Dodd-Frank came out of that, and all of those regulations, those onerous regulations, are adding a lot of cost to every loan, and the consumer's paying for it. So it's a tough environment still now. It's not as contentious as it was before, but it is much more costly than it was.
Do you have a lot of participants that just kind of bail and say, I'm going to go do something else?
I did. I mean, I had, that was a joke. I owned all or part of 3 lending companies, and 3 captive title companies over most of my career. And I think I said it, I'm pretty sure that I did the night that I was here 7 years ago, that in that particular environment, I wouldn't invest my own money then or now back and go start my own lending company today in this particular environment. So there's been a lot of consolidation. There's going to be more. And I wouldn't do it again.
Wouldn't do it again right now.
Not right now.
Well, and you also said something that's interesting. The costs are greater. There's also a condensing of what you can make on loans. So you're kind of getting hit on both sides. But one of the biggest fears in lending, isn't it, that you have to buy something back, that you have written a loan that's not perfect. And
you mean the reps and warranties?
Yeah, the reps and warranties.
Yeah, so there's a lot of repurchase going on. Repurchases are less than they have been over the last few years. because of Dodd-Frank and the CFPB, what they want now is we're supposed to make the perfect loan. And that perfect loan means that the loan that, if I can digress just for a second, when I started as a loan officer back in the 70s, we hand carried everything. We took the loan application. We knew our products. We closed the loan. We had no computers, no cell phones, no iPhones, no fax machines, and closed the loan in 30 days. Okay, and today we're closing the loan in 45 days, and we've got all the technology in the world because everything has been added on to on top of regulation. So we're having to double, triple, and fourple check everything. So to answer your question, it's a tougher environment than it was before. Closings are taking longer, and the fear of repurchase has put in consolidation into the environment. When you have, and I'll finish with this, our largest players in the marketplace, like a Chase, exiting the FHA market, and there are larger banks doing the same thing because of fear of repurchase or what's going to happen when they make the loan. That gives you the state of our industry right now.
Okay. Doug, when you took a look at the picture and it went through that journey of price, 365 to 64 to 265, you have a sentiment report, basically, that if it was checking sentiment during those eras, it would be very different. So in 2015, when you measure the sentiment in the direction it's heading and how it's positive or negative is, what's your take on the consumer and how they feel about real estate?
Well, we survey 1,000 households a month, and there's been a lot of discussion in particular about millennials, the younger households, and very consistently...
So you do it at their mother's house, or I'm only kidding?
Well, we actually, your point being that we have the highest percentage of young people living at home that we've had, we actually surveyed the parents.
Okay. Well, it's pretty easy.
Yeah. We asked them, do you love your children? And if so, for how long? We actually did this. And they said yes for 2 to 5 years. So the story is that one of the effects of the crisis not only affected the prospects of the younger people for employment, and today's 25 to 34-year-olds still have a higher unemployment rate than that same group had 10 years ago. And their median real income is $8,000 lower than that group 10 years ago. So, but the interesting thing was it was also the parents who suffered significant economic damage. So the parents of those 18 to 22-year-olds, 70% of them said this is a good thing they're living at home. A lot of that is their college age. College costs have risen twice as fast as inflation for the last 20 years. So living at home can cut college costs. That's a pretty rational and understandable experience. But 63% of those with the 23 to 34-year-olds also said it's a good thing. Turns out, when you looked at the employment prospects of the parents, they had also lost significant income earning potential in that time period. So those older kids are making a contribution to the parents' household. Still, that younger group today is the most optimistic about the investment value of homes, and over 90% of them want to own a home eventually.
Okay, eventually.
Eventually.
Okay. And that's an important word because in economics, there's something called an output gap. So let's say you wanted to retire at 65 and you said, if I make 8% a year, I'm going to get there at this point. And then you have the Great Recession and you take a big chunk out of it. That's sort of what happened to household creation. And your investments may not come back, but it's pretty certain that that 28 or 35-year-old will someday have a household. And that means we have pent-up household creation at some point that's going to show up. What do you think that time frame is? Is that more economic than it is habit-formed?
It is economic. Take that real median income story that I just told you. The household formation rate for the first half of this decade was roughly half of the 35-year average, which is about 1.2 million households per year. So for the first half of this decade, it was about half that rate.
Okay.
It started to grow, and our expectation is the second half it will get back to that average, which means there's still catch-up to be done going into the next decade. So from a demographic perspective, the U.S. actually has a pretty good demographic profile. The millennials are even a larger group than the boomers were.
Right.
So looking forward, the prospects for real estate are strong.
For demand, absolutely. Okay. I couldn't resist this one. I always thought, like I think back, what was full employment? Like what was the number? And I thought it was 5. Okay. So we are now at 5% unemployment and a 2% 10-year T-bill.
Yeah, that's a bogus number.
Well, of course it is, but maybe, okay. Go ahead. You mean we're not counting some people?
No, you count the people that left the workforce, but I mean, the real number is, north of 11%, I guess, right? Something close to that.
If you count the underemployed.
Oh, if you count those other people out there, yeah, that's right.
Now here's a legitimate question.
I got a call.
Go ahead.
From my son, who's a junior at the University of Kentucky. I live in Kentucky, and he said, "Hey, Dad," he said, "I got straight A's this semester." I said, "Wow, Zach, that's great. You've been a C student. What happened?" He said, "I just threw out 3 tests on each class."
And that was it, huh? Well, now, but see, is it consistently been that way, or is that a new development? So when I look at the chart from 75 or 80, are they telling me a lie at that point? So then the chart is consistently incorrect, and I feel comfortable with it.
You're the numbers guy.
Well, yeah, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics.
Right.
So
why don't you get us some damn lying statistics?
Let me just the why I bring it up, because the last time we don't have 5% unemployment very often.
Right.
But when we did it in 97 to 01, the 10-year T-bill was ranged in that 4 years between 5 and 6.5, and mortgage rates were 6 3/4 to 8.5. And that's pretty consistent. We got there in 73 and another time, but the mortgage rates were 7 to 8.5, and now they're below 4. So as an economist, what do you think of that? Why is that true? Those sets of numbers have never existed before, 5% unemployment and this interest rate.
Well, underneath your description is an assumption that what is called the Phillips curve is a valid economic concept. Okay. And what the Phillips curve is there was an economist named Phillips who suggested there is a trade-off, a mathematically dependable trade-off between the level of unemployment and the level of inflation. So that if unemployment falls below a certain level, that will lead to wage pressures that will show up in the inflation measures. That was actually pretty well discredited in the 1980s. I think it's being discredited again today. That doesn't stop the Federal Reserve, who is primarily a Keynesian-oriented organization, from viewing that as a key measure for what they do with interest rates. To talk a little bit about the structure of our workforce, though, to validate Dave's comment about whether people are actually being counted, the workforce participation rate of working age men has been falling for about 40 years. And by that, that's men the ages of 16 to 54. It was disguised until the year 2000 by the fact that the workforce participation of working age women was rising.
Okay.
Their participation peaked in 2000, and so the workforce participation rate in total has been declining since 2000. It became precipitous in the middle of the crisis, and it still hasn't recovered from there. So really, one of the key questions is, why is that the case? And that's not well understood. And so you're referring to Janet Yellen's comments that say, well, I think there's actually more slack in the market. And truthfully, if you look at the number of working age people, there is more slack. The question is, what will happen in terms of wage rates to bring them back into the market? And go back to that comment I made about the real incomes of 25 to 34-year-olds. That's not happening. what needs to be done, and this is Doug's view, it's why Fannie Mae always makes me put up this disclaimer that says Fannie Mae will deny I was ever here. I usually give them a reason. The focus of economic policy needs to be on income creation as opposed to income redistribution. Because what has happened, it's always the case in a strongly growing economy that the distribution of those returns is different across the span of households. But we've had for the last several years a focus on the redistribution issue, and there's no long-term evidence that if that's the focus of policy, incomes grow, and they certainly have not grown for roughly the last decade.
But I thought the best way to raise income was just to raise it, like just raise the minimum wage. So
You're talking in front of the right group on that one.
I guess so.
You're not going to touch that one.
I was not here tonight either. So.
You know, was that our wives leaving?
I think so.
We've been waiting for an interest rate hike. And then, just for fun, I pulled up the concept of negative interest rates. And so, what is a negative interest rate, and is that a policy that could be implemented, and what would the result be? Anybody?
Well, you see negative interest rates, both nominal and real, that is, including inflation and not, in some significant countries in Europe,
right.
Some major economies.
Right.
What does that mean? It basically means people paying the government to hold their cash for the short term. I have to say, none of the economic textbooks I was trained on suggested that was even a remote possibility.
Yeah.
So this is kind of uncharted territory. The way I think about it is kind of ties back to a call I got from my mother when TARP was voted down the first time. She said, Douglas, which means I'm in trouble. If it was Douglas George, I'd have hung up. Said, we paid our mortgage. What are you people doing with our money? Right? The result of that has been that she gets 0.25% interest on her savings.
Right.
And she's 90.
Right.
So there's inflation, which you were talking about in the example you gave in the 70s and 80s, destroys the purchasing power of your dollar. Right? So a dollar today, if there's inflation of 5%, you can buy 5% less with it a year from now. If financial repression, which is what I would argue is being done with negative interest rates and interest rates arbitrarily close to zero, has essentially the same effect in that it's destroying income growth. And so you're actually taking away from the public the ability to preserve or expand their wealth. And that's really what's happening today.
It's beneficial for an asset like real estate or a stock.
It is.
Okay.
It is. But in the short run.
Right.
In the long run, that's...
Well, I guess that's kind of we've kind of pegged ourselves. I wouldn't want to read, where's the national price right now as opposed to the last peak? The national housing price?
Average sale price?
Yeah. Or not, I think it's the median. It's close enough to the peak that it's sort of on the backs of this 3% mortgage rate. See, that's sort of hard because if you ever normalize rates, and I'm sure at some point we will, there's an equation that's going to come about where the payment is going to be greater than somebody can qualify for.
Sure. So can I digress just for a
second? Sure, please.
All kidding aside, so my wife, who's with me here tonight, we are blessed to have 4 healthy children. And very blessed. 2 girls, 2 boys, all millennials, 35 to 21. And 2 of them are homeowners, both the girls. They both have college degrees. The boys are struggling. So whatever that means. Still. So our youngest daughter, Paige, relocates with her husband this week to Honolulu because he flies helicopters for the Coast Guard, and they bought their first home this week, all right? A 4-bedroom, if that's what you want to call it, I've seen it online, 4 little boxes for a room in Hawaii for $600 and something thousand. It's her first house. And she's calling me. I'm getting emails while we're sitting over here. Would you look at this disclosure? Do I sign this? I'm going, I don't know, I guess.
You're not in that business anymore. Right?
It had TRID all over it. I don't know what the hell it meant. So, but think about that. First-time home buyers at 25 years old buying a house for almost $600 and whatever $1,000, but it's because of low interest rate, and he's getting a bump in income through the military, or they couldn't afford to live over there.
Now,
so
okay,
it's low interest rates. Okay, we don't have a free market. I'll just say it. When you have manipulated interest rates now for what, 7 years?
Yeah.
6.5, 7 years?
Yeah.
It's 0%. If you want it to be free, we need to let interest rates go to wherever they need to go. And the market will adjust around it. And so will incomes. And to Doug's point, people who are on Social Security or investments or whatever, then those interest rates will rise. But we've manipulated everything for the last 6.5 or 7 years and held it down. So we really don't know where we are at this point.
The big price tag there, too, is you've got promises to retired workers who expected that.
Unfunded mandates.
Right, but they expected this journey of interest rate to be there, and for
so
that
what came out this week? There's no raise in Social Security.
Right.
How
That's
about
right.
that?
Yeah.
Aren't they happy?
Yeah.
So
go ahead, Doug.
Just a comment on interest rate behavior. If you think back to the taper tantrum in May of 2013, Chairman Bernanke talked for the first time about the fact that the Fed would eventually stop purchasing mortgage-backed securities and treasuries to expand their portfolio. So simply the statement led to about 110 basis point rise in mortgage rates. So what happened at the beginning of 2014? Home sales fell, right? So there is a relationship between income growth and interest rate change. If interest rate, the long-term interest rate, take out the last 5 years of the 1970s, and you go back to the end of World War II out to the year 2000, the average 30-year fixed-rate mortgage was 6%.
Okay.
Housing did pretty well, growing over that entire time period, right? But incomes also grew pretty well. What happened in the taper tantrum is that the interest rates rose much faster than incomes did, so it put people out of the market. It wasn't that house prices fell, it's that the number of homes sold fell. Then when rates came back down over the next 6 months, the pace of sales picked up. So there's an important lesson there. It is the change in rates relative to the change in incomes. So again, the fact that we've had very little change in real income in the people that would be the first-time home buying category is part of the reason we've seen the move over to the rental side of the equation. But there's a couple other things about interest rates and housing. If interest rates are rising because the economy is expanding, that usually means real incomes are rising and housing does just fine as long as it's not a rapid rise in rates.
Okay.
If interest rates are rising because households expect inflation to be rising, they view housing as an intermediate term hedge against inflation, and housing does just fine. If interest rates are rising because the Fed sees inflation increasing and is trying to slow the economy, that also slows employment and income growth, and then the number of homes transacted falls, but not price. Note, I didn't say anything about price in any of that. So there's a pretty well-established pattern between rate behaviors. A lot of what's critical is the pace of change of rates and the pace of change in incomes.
the pace of change is not usually slow, right? And that's just in looking at the history of when something decides to go up, it's like it has change after change after change, and the volatility it can be quite severe. Not severe might be. I got into the business in 81, and there were 21 Fed fund rate changes in 1 year. So this group of people are completely not used to volatility at all.
Well, that goes back to what Dave was saying about whether it's a function of market changes or a function of monetary policy. So what you're talking about is rapid rate rises by the Fed.
Is that what I said?
That's what you said.
Oh. Okay.
I've been taking notes.
Good.
You'll be on the quiz.
I'm glad.
You can drop 3.
Good. I feel pretty. Thank you. I feel smart tonight sitting next to you. Let me tell you.
We've only got a couple more minutes for this segment, so I just wanted to ask, because the group of here is investors, I have to ask about bulk note sales for just a second in Fannie Mae. You guys still have bulk note sales, correct?
I've heard.
You've heard of that? Okay. Why is that still occurring in a market that doesn't have a lot of foreclosures? Is that the highest and best use to get rid of them, or is it the best way for the occupant owner still to get some kind of modification be possible?
Well, those sales are highly concentrated geographically. Right?
Okay.
I mean, the majority of our seriously delinquent loans are in really 3 states.
Right, Jersey, Florida, and whatever. Not California.
In Nevada.
Okay.
So it's the question is whether there's sufficient demand in those spaces to see the kind of price recovery that you would see in other parts of the country, and the answer is no. The bulk sales are affected in a way that's intended to help potential sustainable homeowners ultimately take those properties and live in them. But I can see where you would want to go with this, which is why not let private investors into that space?
Just another route. In other words, I looked at there was 37 months to that bulk sale.
This is why Fannie Mae says they'll deny that I was ever here.
Okay.
Because I would agree with you. I'm a market-oriented economist, and I think part of the problem that we're still seeing in the housing market is that that prices were not allowed to be market determined in many instances, but rather were managed.
Right.
Excuse me.
Okay. Last question for this segment. Within the next 24 months, do you see any ability for the mortgage world to become more aggressive with loan products and policies within the next 24 months? That undue stimulus that we're looking for, or not looking for, but in other words, is that going to be a factor that isn't present now, in your opinion?
So I answer it this way, in all seriousness. If you believe MBA statistics, which I do, the greatest portion of home buyers will be Hispanic or African American. The white guys sitting here like Doug and I and you, we're going to be at the low end of it. They need loan programs developed so they can purchase the house.
Okay.
They don't exist today for some of the people that are buying. So here's the answer to your question. The market is set to explode from a single-family purchase perspective over the next, and I'm going to go out farther than you, 6 to 8 years. It should explode.
In between then demand. Or starting then?
Starting then.
Starting then,
Yeah,
okay,
so,
5 years from now, okay.
Incomes are down. Interest rates have to be released and go up. I'm not an economist. Doug can correct me if I'm wrong. It has a negative effect initially when rates go up. You get an initial bump. When rates start to go up, everybody gets off the fence, they run out and buy. Look at what we see today, the statistics that came out this week. We are still in a decreased type of economy in Philadelphia Fed and Chicago Fed. It's below where it should be. Job creation is still low. Here's how I'm going to answer your question. We'll have a lousy market for the next 18 months.
Okay.
Okay? And then we have an election, depending on however it goes, and I'm not calling it either way, then you're going to see some change.
Okay.
And the market will come back. But it's poised to take off, and we're going to have a very hot market for anywhere between now and the next 8 years. From a single-family purchase perspective, that's my prediction.
Okay. I was just going to comment on your credit conditions, part of your question. We survey lenders on a quarterly basis, and we do that in part to understand whether lenders have different views than consumers, and also because the only other data out there on that is the Fed survey, which is heavily weighted toward large banks. And in the most recent quarter, there was a statistically significant easing of credit conditions among particularly large and mid-sized institutions. To Dave's point, though, in the FHA space, there's been a big shift away from that market by the big lenders. We've actually seen that in our data at Fannie as well. The share of the business from the large lenders has fallen from about 2/3 to about 1/3 over the last 3 years or so. So it's actually the smaller institutions, which are better at finding those people that Dave's talking about and delivering the opportunity. So we're optimistic about it as well.
Can I give you 10 seconds on
Yeah,
this?
sure.
Way down in the weeds on this. You have the big banks pulling out of the FHA market because they're worried about repurchase, okay? I'm an underwriter. I used to be an underwriter for FHA loans. You used to be able to make a business decision on an FHA loan. If somebody had a one-time life event, they didn't make their payments because their wife had cancer. Document it, make the loan, sign it, close it. They had 30 credit cards that they charged up, you didn't make the loan. You can still make that decision today, but you won't make that decision today because you're afraid of repurchase. There are people out there today, regardless of their ethnicity, that are 550 credit scores that deserve to be home buyers. They're afraid to make those loans because of the repurchase. I'm talking about FHA.
Okay.
You can't make a business decision anymore on a loan based on performance because of the repurchase threat. It's still there. I talk to my friends in the business who still own companies. They've risked everything they have. They're not the big banks, they're lenders. Everything they have is tied up in their company, and they're afraid to make that loan that should be made.
Right, and so they don't.
So they don't make it.
Okay. And that has ramifications because that person, if they had gotten to own a home 2 years ago, would have 30, 40% equity and have a running start of being an entrepreneur or whatever. That's a big deal. One of the things, and then we'll wrap up with this, is that when you invited us to Washington, D.C., I got in front of one of the HUD gentlemen, and I said, you used to be able to do simple assumptions. You know, I didn't have to qualify. I was just sending $35, my name. He said, I don't have any problem with that. And I said, can you put that in writing for me? He says, no, I can't do that. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Oh, I thought I was going to go to a podium. Next up, we'll have 3 panelists, and they can all come up together after I read the bios. Leslie Appleton-Young. Leslie is Vice President and Chief Economist for the California Association of Realtors, a statewide trade organization with over 195,000 members dedicated to the advancement of professionalism in real estate. It got noisy. She directs the activities of the association's member information group and oversees the analysis of the housing market, brokerage industry trends, member communications, and membership development activities. She is also closely involved in the association's strategic planning efforts and is a well-known speaker in California real estate community. We have Eileen Reynolds. Eileen is a vice president for government affairs at Hone Ranch Company, a diversified real estate development and ag business. An owner of the largest contiguous piece of private property in California, located between LA and Bakersfield. The company is committed to responsibly using its 270,000 acres of land and resources to meet the housing, employment, and lifestyle needs of Californians. Reynolds manages the company's political advocacy efforts in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. Reynolds serves in a variety of leadership positions at CBIA. She is also an active director of the California Business Properties Association and president of the Foundation for Environmental and Economic Progress at the federal level. And last but not least, our friend Sean O'Toole. Prior to launching PropertyRadar, Sean O'Toole successfully purchased and flipped more than 150 residential and commercial foreclosures, leveraging 15 years in the software industry. Sean used technology as key competitive advantage to build his successful real estate investment track record. Sean has always thrived in startup environments and as such became a key contributor at Exing Technology, acquired by Real Networks, ISI Global Center, acquired by Global Crossing, and Icarian Inc., acquired by Workstream Inc. We welcome all of our panelists, please, up to our board. I think maybe all over to my left is better. That would be, I can look at all three of you at the same time that way. Okay, interesting stuff. Sean, I'm going to start with you because it's going to then go to Leslie in a follow-up question.
Set me up.
When Ward used to first teach trustee sale buying, it was a very different journey to get to the opening bid, getting updates and all that. You kind of revolutionized all that. You took what you knew in the computer world and you plugged it in to the foreclosure business. So what were the ramifications of that as far as if you were a participant trying to buy at those trustee sales? Let's talk about that first and then go to PropertyRadar and kind of the same journey with now the extended statistics that you deal with.
You know, it's interesting. I actually think it comes back to the employment participation rate that's been going down since for the last 40 years.
You're responsible for that?
Well, yeah, kind of. You know, I started in the software business when I was 14, and reflecting back on that and the things that I've done in that industry, most of what I've done is make things more efficient.
Right.
Which means you need fewer people.
Right.
And I would say more than anything else, that was the change we made. You needed fewer people to track sales, you know. Just one gentleman I can think of, you know, came up to me and said, you know, geez, I used to have 3 people full-time tracking the sales in 2 counties. And now I have them doing other things for me. So it made them a lot more efficient.
The information access also made somebody get up to speed much quicker. They were able to go from 0 to 95 inside of a very tight time period, where that was not true before. But also the cost of access changed. It used to be thousands of dollars a year, and you know, and then it turned into what, $50. And so you had a lot more people able to do that. Now,
I was probably a little too desperate.
Oh, to get people
pricing.
Yeah, those of us who were trying to buy at trustee sales would agree with that. How is access to information, and this is for Leslie, how has access to information for the consumer kind of changed the world of realtors? Because I would think most of them are sort of self-shopping until a much later point than they used to.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's all on the internet, and if it's on the internet, it's true, right? We all know that. And so I think there's a wealth of information out there. There's not always a lot of wisdom and ability to kind of analyze and figure out what to do, which is why even everyone in this room has access to the same information. I mean, everybody's got Google and this, that, and the other thing, and yet you have wonderful teachers, you know, who make a difference in people's lives because there's just different ways of thinking about things and analyzing things. So the realtor used to be the key to the information, and I think, you'd be looking for a home in the 80s, and there'd be this big giant book with like grainy black and white pictures, and your realtor would go, I'm going to give this to you over the weekend, but don't tell anyone or I'll go to jail, right? And so, what's happened is the whole value of the realtor really isn't about finding the home. It's really about navigating the whole transaction. And I think the prior panel really talked about how difficult that is today, even with all the efficiencies and programs and technology. To get from point A to point B is a lot.
The makeup of the buyer now, as far as the household that's buying a property, when I was growing up, it was the married couple and the 2.3 kids or something like that. And now that's a very different makeup of who is having to, or who's trying to buy a home. And many times they're now one adult worker per household. And so how has that changed, I guess, what they're able to buy and their willingness to either buy or just say, I'm going to have to rent?
Well, I think that's probably a segue into the housing affordability crisis, which we're facing again today. It seems to be kind of on a 10-year cycle. I think the homeownership rate for millennials is about 20%, and many of them had boomer parents that were able to write checks to get them in, so that down payment hurdle is really, really tough. But you also just have a flourishing of, I don't even want to call it alternative lifestyles, but 30, 40 years ago, it was the mom and the dad and the two kids, and now it's people actually choosing to be single because it's less stressful for some people. You have same-sex couples and partners, and everybody's great, so it's just a very diverse world. I think the one point I want to make, and Doug made some really great comments about millennials, and millennials really do want to buy homes, but they have, because of the economy and their codependent boomer parents, have really delayed adulthood by about 10 years. So now that we've got household formation coming, you know who you are. I am one. You know who you are. But now that we are seeing a pickup in household formation, job creation in California is much faster than it is for the nation, and so on and so forth. You're seeing more home ownership actually happening for millennials, and I do agree with David. I think you are going to have kind of a renaissance once we get through the next couple of years, because they're going to have families, and once you have kids, you have a whole different attitude about home ownership, and you really have to focus on schools.
We're going to revisit affordability in a minute because that's one of my favorite topics, and Sean and I have been batting it around. But Eileen, I want to welcome you to the panel for the first time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We appreciate you being here. And honestly, it seems to be really appropriate. There was, on your bio, talk about that big project where you have 270,000 acres?
Tajon Ranch. I'm the vice president for government affairs for Tajon Ranch Company. Many of you would know that on the Grapevine if you drive I-5, the road that's shut down today. Our employees couldn't go to the job today because our headquarters is in Lebec, that mecca. But I work for a large land developer agribusiness company. That's my day job, and I'm based in Sacramento, but my volunteer job is I'm the chairperson of the California Building Industry Association this year. So we have some builders here, or somebody who cares about building. Thank you. Thank you.
And to be able to develop that project, there was 240,000 acres of that was sort of put in conservative.
Well, what we did, Bruce, is we entered into negotiations with 5 environmental groups. It started with 6. One group is notorious for litigating every future development there is in anywhere in the nation. It's called the Center for Biological Diversity. We were in 2-year negotiations with these 5 environmental groups, and I mean big ones: Sierra Club, Natural Resources Defense Council, Planning Conservation League, and others. And we were in the confidential negotiations over our property for a good 14 months, and then Center for Biological Diversity saw that there wasn't going to be an agreement and decided they needed to leave the table because that wasn't their style. They prefer to roll up their sleeves and sue people. So what we did was we have four development projects. If you've driven over the Grapevine, if you're going south, about to ascend the Tejon Pass, we have the Commerce Center, Tejon Ranch Commerce Center at the base of the Grapevine, where the new outlets at Tejon is located, if any of you have the time to stop. And then we're going to build a master plan community there called Grapevine of about 12,000 units. You go up the mountain into Lebec, and we're going to do a second home community called Tejon Mountain Village, which will be about 3,000 units in some of our most beautiful stretches of land. And then further down the freeway in Los Angeles County to the north, about 19,000 units in a master plan community called Centennial.
Now,
so there is actually something that could happen as far as new development in California, but from the standpoint of the industry I'm representing tonight, one of the toughest things to do in California, as you all know, is to build anything in this state.
Is the role of the environmental sector going to become more of an issue in the next few years? And we have a Governor Brown that seems to be pretty aggressive in some of his stances. 50% of our electricity coming up is supposed to be renewable. So how does that add, how does that change for the builder, what they're able to do and able to get approved?
Well, I would argue that they've been strong here for as long as most of us have been alive. I mean, when all the environmental laws came into effect in the 70s, California was at the forefront of it, and we continue to be, especially now, as you mentioned. We have a governor and a pro tem of the state senate that want to make California be the climate change leader of the world. So they want to reduce greenhouse gases, and they want to ratchet down on every sector in our economy, including development. So we saw some bills in the legislature this year that essentially we believe, one, that we were able to stall for the time being, that would have essentially required that if you're going to create a new home, it's got to be zero net energy, meaning it doesn't use any energy. It has to be able to turn back to the grid. We haven't figured out exactly how to do that yet. And one of the things that we ended up having to pay quite a great deal of money to commission a study by some experts who were from both sides of the aisle, both Republican and Democrat, former experts at the Department of Finance and the Legislative Analyst's Office, and they brought us a study that said, well, if you want to try to be zero net energy, it's going to be at least $58,000 per unit. And that's in addition to a lot of the other societal problems that are put on the backs of new home buyers, such as, increased taxes. Right now, there's a big movement on housing affordability where we've seen some communities, the courts have said there needs be no nexus between local government's ability to raise money on new development for housing affordability programs. In some areas of the state, they're raising fees up to $30,000 to $60,000 per unit to pay for affordable housing that doesn't need to even be related to the provision of what the new developer is doing. So we have a situation in California specifically where, yes, our legislature is against us from the get-go, and at the same time, we've already have layers and layers of regulation upon the industry. And one of the people earlier said to me, well, my gosh, it's as if people want to outlaw any growth in California. And I think there are people that do believe that would really rather not see any growth, because if you don't build it, potentially they won't come. But as many of you know, we've got, in some cases, I've heard, this is not my forte because I'm working for a land developer, but there are places in existing neighborhoods where, 2 and 3 families are living in one house. Well, that's not addressing our housing crisis. We need to build more.
Leslie or Sean, the water issue, that's, one of the things, I'm very suspicious of radical elements on either side of a fence, to be honest with you. But this is sort of like a real drought, and it seems like there's a real chance to say, okay, well, here are the rules, and we're going to fine you a whole bunch of dollars if you don't do stuff. And I start to be concerned about the building industry just being told you can't build anything new because that's going to use water. Sean, are you concerned at all that type of that type of mood could reach into the investor world and say, okay, well, you have a rental that there's water on the sidewalk, and they have a system where you get told on. That's my concern, is the investor might be the target, sort of like the tall grass thing that we got some vines on. So just any input on?
Why not?
Why not?
I don't mean that it should, but I mean that certainly seems to be the mentality. I mean, on the affordable housing thing, how anybody thinks housing in California can be more affordable by adding fees to new housing for affordable housing. You're increasing the cost of housing to make affordable housing. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
And
when
guess
you
what?
can have
It
that
was our Supreme Court in the
Yeah.
state of California that opined on that, and we're appealing it to the U.S. Supreme Court.
So, I mean, to the degree that you have that kind of, inane argument that in order to have affordable housing, we need to add fees to housing, like it just doesn't pass the smell test on the logic scale, right? Can you have other ridiculous arguments? I think absolutely. I think we're going to face lots of them.
I just want to add here, though, I think it's great and fine, and you can point the finger at government, but I think the whole not in my backyard attitude is a huge part of the issue. And anyone that drives the freeways in Southern California, I think, has every right to feel that we can't have one more housing unit in Southern California, right? But this isn't rocket science. There are global capitals with examples galore. It's high-density development along viable transportation corridors. And unless you're going to have a one-child rule or deal with population growth in another way, you've got to get rational about new construction. Because I'll tell you what's going to happen. Part of the explosion that David was going to talk about in the market in 4, 5, and 6, 8 years is not going to happen in California. It's happening in Texas and Denver and Seattle and Portland, because that's where the young families can go and actually buy affordable housing. They're not going to be able to do it in Southern California, and I think that's a real shame. Eileen's at Tejon Ranch. You're not dealing with existing homeowners, but developers that are. I mean, let's face it, CEQA is the go-to place for I'm going to sue and stop this development. So it's also us. It's not just the environmentalists and not just the government. It's the public not really being able to envision a different future.
May I add one thing?
Yes, sure.
One thing I think I can say is if we're successful at Tejon Ranch, we will have affordable housing, but it wasn't for some sacrifice. And one place we didn't get to was, sure, we signed this agreement that says we're going to set aside 90% of our land for the environment. But what we did was what we did in that is we got those 5 nationwide environmental groups to say they would stand down in the CEQA process. So they're not going to challenge our developments, and if they do anything near that, we can knock them down and stop them from that. So we will be able to develop these areas without being nickeled and dimed to death by these environmentalists. But I mean, we didn't give up land over it, but we gave up the ability to develop our other future land holdings as a result.
I mean, at the end of the day, there's places in Texas where you can build a house for the cost of a permit in certain places in California.
That's right.
Which is pathetic, yes.
So if you want to address affordable housing and that type of thing, I completely agree with Leslie. You also have to think about infrastructure, and I live in Tahoe. You want to talk about a not in my backyard, we're trying to build a school up there right now, and we've got folks in one of the highest end communities living on a golf course, which golf's great, but it's not like a really sound environmental use of land, I don't think. And and here they are with their golf course home saying, well, we don't want you to develop this land. Well, that land was entitled for a school. We're not asking for a zoning change or anything else. It's been entitled for a school forever. And they're saying no. I'm saying, well, okay, how about I show up with the bulldozer at your house tomorrow and let's convert that back to wilderness first. I mean, it is, to Leslie's point, it's not a reasonable argument, if a piece of land is entitled and should be allowed, it should be able to be built. And we've got a second guessing of that on everything, and that just adds a lot of cost to the process. So maybe we need to put our hands up and say, look, do-over. We're going to we're going to think about the master plan here and kind of re-entitle everything and come up with some sort of compensation for those people who gain and the people who lose. But this current situation where you've got people with land that's properly zoned and entitled having to face years. There's one folks that just trying to develop some property in Truckee. They've been at it for 20 years.
Wow.
Trying to get their property entitled. And the folks aren't wealthy. They're not doing well. It's not some rich developer. They have this gift of some land, but they can't do anything with it. And 20 years, that's not fair. That's not right.
No. We've run out of time for this segment. I do want to circle back around the foreclosure, the affordability question and with the rest of the panel. So we'll take a dessert break right now, and then we'll come back up here.
We'll be back at 9 o'clock.
I know.
The Norris Group would like to thank its gold sponsors for supporting I Survived Real Estate. Adrenaline Athletics, Coachella Valley Real Estate Investors Association, Coldwell Banker Town & Country, Elite Auctions, iMortgage, In a Day Development, Inland Valley Association of Realtors, Jennifer Buys Houses, Keller Williams Corona, Keystone CPA, Kukan & Clark, Las Brisas Escrow, LA South RIA, Lavis Tax Wealth Management, National RIA, Northern California Real Estate Investors Association, North San Diego Real Estate Investors, Pasadena Phoebe, Pilot Limousine, Orange County Phoebe, Real Wealth Network, Realty 411 Magazine, Resonant Lens Photography, Rick and Leanne Rossiter, Sacramento Real Estate Club, Capital City Wealth Builders, Southern California chapter of the Appraisal Institute, Sonoka Corporation, Spinnaker Loans, Tri-Counties Association of Realtors, U-Direct IRA Services, Weston South Coast Plaza, Wilson Investment Properties, Inc.,